The rain fell in sheets, cold and unforgiving, drenching the earth and all who dared remain beneath its relentless assault. At the edge of the crumbling porch, a dog sat motionless, his shiny body trembling with the chill that pierced his soaked fur. Rex didn't flinch. He didn't seek shelter. His eyes, dark pools of unwavering hope, were fixed on the horizon, a silent vigil for his missing master. Days had bled into nights, and nights into weeks, but Rex stayed, tethered not by chains, but by the invisible threads of loyalty and love. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and exhaustion threatened to pull him under, but still, he waited. Each passing shadow on the road made his ears perk up, his tail twitch in anticipation, only to sink again when the truth returned. No one was coming. The world around him moved on, indifferent to the faithful heart breaking in the storm. Yet Rex remained, his quiet resolve as unyielding as the rain, clinging to the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, his master would return. As Rex waits, flashes of the past surface in his mind, vivid and haunting. He recalls the day his master, Michael, disappeared. A golden car had pulled into the driveway, its engine rumbling like distant thunder. Two men, tall and grim, had stepped out, their expressions as cold as the rain that now drenched Rex. Their voices were sharp and cutting, the tone of an argument on the brink of violence. Michael had met them reluctantly, his posture tense and his voice quivering as he spoke. Rex remembers his master's hand trembling as it rested briefly on the doorframe. The men spoke in low tones, but their anger was unmistakable. Phrases like "final warning" and "you know the consequences" floated to Rex's sensitive ears. One of the men pointed a finger at Michael, and Rex could sense the threat in the air, his protective instincts stirring even though he didn't understand the words. After what felt like hours of tense conversation, the men gestured for Michael to get into the car. Michael hesitated, looking back at the house, his eyes meeting Rex's for a fleeting moment. There was fear in his gaze, but also something else, regret. "Stay here, boy," Michael murmured, his voice barely audible, before he stepped into the car and was driven away. Rex barked, pawed at the driveway, and even tried to chase the car, but the rain was heavy, and his strength gave out quickly. Since that day, Rex has waited, replaying the memory in his mind. He doesn't understand why his master hasn't come back, but feels in his heart that Michael is in trouble. The world seems to blur around him, each day blending into the next as he clings to the hope of seeing Michael again. Other figures occasionally pass the house, delivery workers, neighbors, or strangers, but none of them pay Rex much attention. Now, weeks later, the memory lingered like a ghost, haunting Rex as he waited. The house was quiet, too quiet. The once vibrant presence of his master replaced by an oppressive stillness. The neighbors came and went, sparing only the occasional glance at the lonely dog on the porch. Sometimes someone would leave scraps of food, but most days, Rex had only the rain and his memories for company. One night, as the storm raged with renewed fury, Rex's ears pricked up. There was a sound, faint but distinct, cutting through the drumming rain, footsteps. His body tensed, a low growl rumbling in his throat as a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. The figure paused at the edge of the yard, scanning the house with an air of caution. Rex's growl deepened, his body coiled like a spring ready to launch. The figure, a man in a black leather jacket, raising his hands in an attempt to calm the dog. "Easy, boy," he muttered, but his voice carried no warmth, only nervous energy. His sharp eyes darted to the porch, where a pile of bags lay untouched since Michael's departure. The man took a tentative step forward. That was all it took. Rex lunged, teeth bared, a ferocious snarl ripping through the night. The man stumbled back, tripping over a loose stone and landing hard in the mud. He cursed loudly, scrambling to his feet, his hands held protectively in front of him. "Stupid mutt," he spat, retreating further. Rex advanced to the edge of the porch, his growls unrelenting. The intruder hesitated, glaring at the dog before backing away toward the road. The man growled, his voice dripping with menace. "We'll be back." The stranger vanished into the storm, leaving Rex alone once more. But he wasn't just waiting anymore. The house wasn't abandoned, and Rex wasn't helpless. His master might be gone, but Rex would defend this home and everything in it, no matter the cost. He was standing guard, protecting the life they had built together. Rex's thoughts drifted back to Michael. His master had always been kind, gentle even. But there had been a change, a shadow that had fallen over him weeks before he disappeared. It had started at the airport, Rex recalled, when Michael returned from his trip with a bag that didn't quite seem his. The scent was wrong, unfamiliar, and carried an odd mixture of leather, smoke, and something metallic. At first, life had gone on as usual. Michael worked in his little office, his fingers flying over the keyboard late into the night. But then, Rex began to notice the subtle shifts. Michael's phone calls grew quieter, more secretive. He'd check the windows often, his eyes darting nervously toward the driveway. And then there was the money, bundles of it, hidden hastily in drawers and cabinets. Rex didn't understand the meaning of it, but he could sense the tension it brought. The night was silent for a moment after the car left, but the peace was short-lived. Rex's ears twitched at the faint crunch of gravel underfoot. Another car arrived. This time, its headlights were off, and its presence felt even darker. The vehicle came to a halt, and 4 figures stepped out. Rex immediately sprang to his feet, his growls low and guttural. One of the men whispered harshly, "He's got to have the bag somewhere, or we'll find it." "Quiet," another hissed, brandishing a silenced pistol. The group moved toward the house, their movements calculated and predatory. Rex positioned himself near the door, blocking their entry. His bark was loud and furious, a sharp contrast to the quiet of the intruders. One of them cursed under his breath. "This dog's going to be a problem." Rex lunged without hesitation, teeth bared and claws outstretched. He caught one of the men by the arm, his powerful jaws sinking in, causing a muffled yelp of pain. The man struggled, trying to shake him off, but Rex held firm, his loyalty transforming him into a force of nature. The other 3 reacted quickly, one swinging a heavy flashlight toward Rex. The blow landed on his side, causing a sharp whimper to escape him, but he refused to back down. He released the injured man and turned to face the others, his barks relentless. They shouted at one another, trying to coordinate, but Rex's determination kept them off balance. "Just shoot the damn dog," one of them growled. The man with the pistol stepped forward, his hands steady. Rex didn't waver. He lunged at the man, his jaws snapping just inches from the weapon. The man staggered back, but as Rex prepared for another attack, a faint thwip echoed through the night. The silenced shot hit its mark. Rex stumbled, a sharp pain radiating through his shoulder. His legs wobbled, and he collapsed onto the porch, his breaths shallow and labored. The men hesitated, their eyes flicking between the injured dog and the house. "Is it down?" one asked, his voice unsteady. "Yeah," the man with the pistol replied, his tone flat. "Let's move." The men stormed the house, their heavy boots echoing through the empty halls. They tore through drawers, overturned furniture, and ripped open cabinets. But no matter where they looked, the bag was nowhere to be found. "Where is it?" one of them snarled, slamming his fist against the wall. Outside, Rex lay still, his vision blurred and his body racked with pain. But even in his weakened state, his mind was sharp. He heard their voices, their threats, their frustration. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, Rex dragged himself toward the porch steps. His movements were slow, every inch in agony, but his resolve was unbroken. Inside the house, the men argued, their voices growing louder. One of them kicked over a chair, shouting, "This is a waste of time. It's here somewhere," another insisted. "We just have to." The sound of Rex's growl cut through the air, weak but filled with defiance. The men froze, their eyes darting toward the door. "He's still alive?" one muttered, incredulous. Rex stood at the threshold, his body trembling but his stance firm. Blood matted his fur, and his breaths came in shallow gasps, but his eyes burned with unyielding determination. He barked, the sound hoarse but commanding, daring them to take another step. Rex understood that these men were looking for the bag Michael had brought home that day from the airport. The one Michael had spent hours staring at, his face a mix of disbelief and temptation. Rex remembered the argument Michael had with himself, pacing the living room as he opened the bag to reveal stacks of crisp bills. Michael had been a good man, but that bag had changed him. He talked to Rex as if the dog could understand, confessing his guilt while counting the money. "It's not mine," he'd said, "but do you know what this could do for us?" Rex had simply wagged his tail, unaware of the weight of Michael's decision. Michael had kept the bag. He'd even spent some of the money. But Rex had sensed the change in him, the constant unease, the jumpiness every time the phone rang or a car passed by. And then the black car came, and Michael was gone. The men searched everywhere but found nothing and eventually left. The hours passed slowly, the house growing quiet once more. Rex lay on the porch, his pain a constant reminder of the battle he'd fought, but even in his weakened state he felt a sense of triumph. He had protected his master's home, kept the intruders at bay. It didn't matter that he was alone or that his body was battered. What mattered was that he had fulfilled his duty. As Rex limped along, a familiar house came into view, Daniel's house, an old friend of Michael's. Rex's steps quickened despite the pain. He reached the porch and gave a weak bark, the sound carrying his desperation. The door opened, and Daniel stepped out, his eyes widening in shock at the sight of Rex. "Rex, what happened to you, boy?" Daniel knelt beside him, his hand gently brushing over Rex's blood-matted fur. The sight of the wound made Daniel's face tighten with concern. Rex gave a low whine and nudged Daniel's hand, then turned toward the trail he had been following. His eyes, filled with urgency, locked onto Daniel's. Daniel frowned, sensing that something was seriously wrong. "All right, let me help you inside first," he said. After tending to Rex's wound, Daniel noticed that, fortunately, the bullet had passed through the skin without hitting any bones. However, Rex was fainting due to significant blood loss. Rex's shoulder was bound with a makeshift bandage, but it was clear the dog was pushing himself beyond his limits. Despite the pain, Rex's eyes burned with determination, his every action purposeful. Rex limped down the path leading back to his master's home, his injured leg dragging slightly but his resolve unbroken. Beside him walked Daniel, his brow furrowed with worry as he matched the dog's slow pace. "Rex," Daniel said softly, watching the dog's determined movements. "You sure about this, boy?" Rex let out a faint whine and pushed forward, occasionally glancing back at Daniel to ensure he was following. Every step was an effort. Yet, his loyalty to Michael drove him onward. The house was eerily quiet when they arrived. The yard, once full of life and laughter, now stood abandoned, its silence heavy with memories. Rex headed straight for the backyard, his nose low to the ground. Daniel followed closely, his gaze scanning the property for any signs of danger. Rex paused in front of his old doghouse, his body tense despite his exhaustion. The structure was old and weather-worn, its wood splintered and faded. To anyone else, it looked like a forgotten relic of a simpler time. But Rex knew better. He pawed at the ground near the base of the doghouse, his claws scraping against the dirt with urgency. "Here?" Daniel crouched beside Rex, watching as the dog continued to dig despite his injury. "You're telling me it's here?" Rex gave a low bark, his tail wagging faintly. His eyes locked with Daniel's, a silent plea to trust him. Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed a stick from the ground and began to dig alongside him. The soil was loose, as though it had been disturbed recently. After a few minutes, the stick struck something solid. Daniel pushed aside the dirt with his hands, revealing a weathered canvas bag hidden beneath the surface. His breath caught as he pulled it free, brushing away the soil. "This has to be it," Daniel murmured, unzipping the bag. Inside were stacks of cash, neatly bundled, and a hastily folded note. Daniel opened the paper, his eyes scanning the words written in Michael's familiar scrawl. "If you're reading this, it means my time has run out. They're after me." He also included the phone number they had been calling him on. Daniel sat back on his heels, his mind racing. He looked at Rex, who was sitting beside him, his head resting on his uninjured paw. The dog's eyes, though tired, held a spark of hope. "You knew this was here all along, didn't you?" Daniel asked, his voice thick with emotion. Rex remembered the night when his master had buried the bag there. Meanwhile, Daniel decided to go to the police station. The quiet hum of activity filled the small police station as Daniel stepped inside, carrying the canvas bag in one hand and a heavy heart in the other. Behind him, Rex limped steadily, his tired eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Every step Daniel took felt like a weight being lifted, though the responsibility of what lay ahead pressed down just as hard. A young officer at the front desk looked up, his expression shifting to concern as he saw the dog's condition. "Sir, is everything all right?" "No," Daniel replied, placing the bag on the counter with a firm thud. "This belongs to my friend Michael. He's in trouble, and we need your help." Within minutes, Daniel and Rex were seated in an interview room with Detective Harris, a middle-aged officer whose sharp eyes hinted at years of experience. As Daniel recounted everything, the bag, the criminals, the attack at Michael's house, and Rex's determination to protect his master, Harris listened intently, taking notes and occasionally glancing at Rex, who lay at Daniel's feet, his head resting on his paws. Daniel told them that Michael didn't mean for any of this to happen. He was scared, and he made a mistake. But he's a good man. He just needs help. "This is serious," Harris said, his tone grave. "Your friend could be in grave danger." In a dimly lit operations room, technicians worked swiftly, their screens displaying a dizzying array of signals and maps. One technician called out, "We've got a hit." The phone was last active about 20 minutes ago, sending a message from an industrial district on the outskirts of town. Harris leaned over the technician's shoulder, studying the map. "That's a known hotspot for criminal activity," he muttered. "It's not surprising they'd hole up there." Daniel watched anxiously as the team coordinated their next steps. Rex, sensing the tension, shifted on his paws, his ears perking up. "We'll move in carefully," Harris said, addressing his team. "These guys are dangerous and we need to minimize risks." He turned to Daniel. "You've done more than enough. Let us handle this now." The convoy of police vehicles rolled out in hurry. Rex and Daniel followed convoy in car, keeping a safe distance. Though Harris had insisted they stay back, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to be there, for Michael and for Rex. As they neared the industrial district, the atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. The abandoned warehouses loomed like sleeping giants, their broken windows and rusted doors hinting at years of neglect. The officers moved swiftly, surrounding the building indicated by the phone signal. Rex growled softly, his body tense despite his injuries. He nudged Daniel, his nose pointing toward a corner of the building where a faint light flickered. "You're right, boy," Daniel whispered. "They're in there." Inside the warehouse, the criminals were huddled around a makeshift table, counting stacks of cash and planning their next move. Their conversation was cut short by the sound of the warehouse door being forced open. "Police! Hands in the air!" Harris's voice echoed through the cavernous space. Panic erupted among the men. Two reached for their weapons, but the officers were faster. In seconds, the warehouse was flooded with armed officers, their movements precise and coordinated. One of the men bolted toward the back exit, clutching a phone. Rex, still outside, sensed the escape attempt. Ignoring his injuries, he sprang into action, barking furiously as he darted toward the fleeing man. The commotion caught the officer's attention, and Harris quickly directed a team to the rear. They intercepted the man just as Rex cornered him, his growls keeping the criminal at bay. "Good boy, Rex," an officer called out as they secured the man in handcuffs. Back inside, the remaining criminals were subdued, their weapons confiscated. As the officers searched the area, they found evidence linking the gang to a string of robberies and violent crimes. Harris approached one of the men, holding up a photo of Michael. "Where is he?" The man sneered but hesitated when Harris leaned closer. "We're not bluffing. Tell us, or die." The man relented. "He's alive. He's in a cabin about 10 miles from here." The information led the officers to a remote cabin hidden deep in the woods. When they arrived, they found Michael tied to a chair, his face pale, but his eyes filled with relief as he saw the officers enter. "Daniel! Rex!" Michael's voice cracked with emotion as his friends entered behind the officers. Rex limped toward his master, his tail wagging despite his obvious exhaustion. Michael knelt, pulling his dog into a gentle embrace. "You saved me, boy," Michael whispered, tears streaming down his face. The sun was setting as Michael stepped out of the police station, the warm hues of dusk casting long shadows on the pavement. He paused for a moment, the weight of recent events still pressing heavily on his shoulders. At his side, Rex limped slightly but stood tall, his ever-watchful eyes scanning the street as if ensuring his master was safe. "They're letting me go with a warning," Michael murmured to Daniel, who was waiting nearby. His voice carried a mix of relief and humility, tinged with the lingering disbelief that he had been given a second chance. Daniel clapped a hand on his shoulder, his smile encouraging. "You're lucky, Michael. Not everyone gets a shot at redemption. Make it count." Michael nodded, his gaze falling gently on Rex. "I will. For him," his voice barely a whisper, as if the weight of the moment made it hard to speak. At the same time, Rex lay quietly on a patch of soft grass, his chest rising and falling with slow, labored breaths. The wounds on Rex's body bled too much, his life slowly slipping away with every breath he took. "No, Rex, no," Daniel choked, his voice breaking as tears fell uncontrollably. "You can't leave me. You've always been by my side. Please fight, buddy. Please." But this time Rex's strength had waned, and his body could no longer respond. Daniel cradled him close, his heart shattering with every passing second. "Goodbye, my brave boy. You were my hero, my family, my everything." With a soft sigh, Rex looked up one final time, his eyes filled with an unspoken love and gratitude that transcended words. As his chest stilled, Daniel felt the weight of the loss sink deep into his soul. The world around them grew eerily still, and Daniel was left with nothing but the aching emptiness of losing his most loyal companion and hero. The story of Rex and Daniel will forever echo in the hearts of dog lovers, a timeless testament to the unbreakable bond of love and loyalty, a love that will never fade, even in death.